Welcome to ESL Listening Practice. So, in a recent study of corporate boardrooms, researchers found something absolutely fascinating. They discovered that swapping out just 3 simple vocabulary words increased a speaker's perceived leadership ability by 40%.
Wow. 40%. That's massive.
Just by changing a few words. And, you're listening to us right now because you share a very specific, very common goal with millions of other people around the world. You want to sound fluent.
Right.
You want to sound confident. And let's be honest, you want to sound highly intelligent when you speak English. You want the words coming out of your mouth to match the smart, complex thoughts that are already in your head.
That's exactly right. And it's a very frustrating feeling when there's a disconnect there. We hear this from intermediate or B2 level English learners every single day in our teaching practice.
Constantly.
Yeah. You have this brilliant idea, like in your native language, you'd explain it beautifully. But because you're speaking a second language, you feel like you sound, like a child.
Yeah, exactly.
You know enough English to survive, but you really want to thrive. You want respect in the workplace. You want to be taken seriously in academic discussions. Or maybe, you're pitching a startup to a room full of investors and you need them to trust your competence completely.
Totally. Just picture that scenario for a second. You're standing in front of those investors. You know your product inside and out. But when you start explaining the financial projections, you just freeze up.
Right. It happens all the time.
You string together these short, choppy sentences. Or maybe you use overly complicated academic jargon to try and compensate for it. But you can see the investor's eyes just glazing over.
Yeah, they look confused, not impressed.
Exactly. So here is the biggest secret we can share with you today. Based on our own research and years of teaching. Sounding intelligent in English is not, and I repeat, is not about memorizing long, difficult, complicated vocabulary words.
Thank you. Yes.
You don't need to swallow a dictionary to sound smart. Instead, true fluency is about using the right connecting words at the absolute right time.
What's really fascinating here is how often learners get this completely backward. They spend hours and hours studying highly technical, rare words, thinking that's the magic key to sounding like a native speaker. But native speakers don't use those massive words in everyday conversation.
Right. They just don't.
Think about the most charismatic speakers you know. They sound intelligent because their ideas flow logically. They build a solid, obvious bridge from one thought to the next, and they build those bridges using specific, structured, connecting words. It reduces the cognitive load on the listener.
Oh, cognitive load, that's a great term. It basically means how hard the listener's brain has to work to understand you, right?
Exactly. When you don't use connecting words, the listener's brain has to work overtime to figure out how your sentences relate to each other. It's exhausting for them. When you use the right connectors, you do the work for them. You guide them by the hand.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means we have a very clear mission for our discussion today. We're going to break down 5 specific connecting words. Just 5.
Just 5.
But these 5 words are going to completely change the way you speak, how you are perceived, and how you manage that cognitive load for your audience.
Absolutely.
We're looking at, however, therefore, whereas despite, and moreover, we'll explore them in a really simple, practical way to help you organize your thoughts clearly and speak like a natural, confident native speaker.
These 5 words are basically your new best friends. But before we look at the words individually, we really need to understand the myth of complexity. We need to talk about why these simple connectors are actually more powerful than the biggest, most complicated words you can find in an academic textbook.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because I see this happen all the time, and honestly, it breaks my heart a little bit.
Yeah, the thesaurus trap.
Right. A student wants to impress their boss in a meeting. They want a promotion. So the night before, they look up a giant, overly academic word in a thesaurus. Let's say ubiquitous instead of everywhere.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Using it in a sentence during the meeting, and suddenly the whole room goes quiet. And not in a good way. It sounds unnatural. It sounds like a robot reading a textbook.
Yes, exactly. When you use words that are too complex or overly formal for the situation, it actually highlights that you're a language learner. It disrupts the natural flow of communication. It creates friction. True fluency, the kind of fluency that commands respect in a boardroom or a university classroom, comes from structure structure. When you organize your thoughts clearly, your confidence shines through automatically. The listener doesn't even notice the individual words you're using. They notice the power of your ideas. They notice your logic.
Let's use a visual analogy to make this crystal clear for everyone.
Yeah.
Imagine you're building a house. The basic nouns and verbs you already know. Words like project, develop, market, create, revenue. Those are your bricks. They are solid, they are heavy, they are the main material of the house. You've spent years collecting these bricks. But if you just stack bricks on top of each other, what happens?
Well, there's nothing holding them together.
Right. A strong wind comes along and the whole house falls apart.
Yeah.
You need cement. These 5 connecting words, however, therefore, whereas despite, moreover, they are the cement. They are the mortar. They are what holds the heavy bricks together so you can build something tall, strong, and weather-resistant.
That's a brilliant way to look at it, actually. Without the cement, the ideas just fall apart. To go back to that cognitive load concept, if you just throw bricks at someone, they have to catch them and try to build the house themselves in their own mind.
Right, like here's a brick.
Yeah. Oh, he said revenue, then he said down, then he said marketing. I guess he means revenue is down because of marketing. The listener is exhausted doing all that mental construction.
It's too much work. But tell me, from your experience as a teacher, why do intermediate B2 learners almost always forget the cement? I mean, they buy all these expensive bricks, they study vocabulary flashcards for hours, but they forget the cement entirely. Why is that?
You know, if we connect this to the bigger picture of language learning, it's really an issue of how languages are traditionally taught in schools worldwide.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, think about your own experience. When you begin learning English, you're tested on vocabulary lists. You memorize 20 nouns and 20 verbs for a Friday spelling quiz. You're constantly rewarded with good grades for knowing the bricks.
Yeah, that's true.
Very few teachers spend enough time grading students on the cement. There are no spelling tests for how smoothly you transition between 2 paragraphs. So learners reach the B2 level with a massive pile of bricks in their heads, but they were never trained on how to smoothly mix the cement and apply it. They just throw bricks at the listener and hope for the best.
Literally just, here is a brick, here's another brick, understand my brilliant idea.
That's so true. It's totally exhausting for everyone involved.
Exactly.
So let's stop throwing bricks.
Yeah.
Let's start mixing some cement. Let's move to the most common communicative need we have in any conversation, whether it's a casual chat or a high-stakes business pitch, showing a difference or a contrast between 2 ideas.
Contrast is a fundamental part of human communication. We're constantly evaluating the world by weighing options, good versus bad, expectation versus reality, profit versus loss. And to express this elegantly, to show that we are capable of evaluating these differences, we need our first 2 words, however and whereas.
Let's start with however. This is a fantastic word.
Technical.
In its most basic sense, it simply means but, or in contrast. When you use it, you're introducing an opposite idea.
Yes, and let's look at a very natural use case. Here's an example. I wanted to go out, however I was too tired. Listen to the structure there. These are 2 completely separate sentences. I wanted to go out. Full stop. A pause. However, I was too tired. It sounds so deliberate. Let's look at another example, maybe something from a professional setting. This marketing method is effective. However, it takes too much time. Again, you make a strong positive statement first. This marketing method is effective. You let that brick sit there. You let the listener acknowledge it.
Right, give him a second.
Then you apply the cement. However, you introduce the contrast. It takes too much time. It breaks a long, complicated, messy thought into 2 clear, confident, distinct statements.
This raises a really important point about pacing and perception. When a B2 learner uses the simple word but, they almost always rush. They say, I wanted to go out, but I was tired. The method is effective, but it takes time. It all blends together into one breathless, run-on sentence.
Yeah, just one big blur of words.
Exactly. When you use however, it forces you to slow down mechanically. It forces you to put a period at the end of the first idea. It forces you to take a breath. That breath makes you sound incredibly thoughtful. It makes you sound like a leader who is carefully considering both sides of a complex situation before making a judgment.
Okay, I want to jump in and play devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
Because I know what some listeners are thinking right now.
Sure, go for it.
If, however, just literally means but, why can't we just use but all the time? I mean, but is a perfectly good English word. It's shorter. It's easier to remember. Why bother training ourselves to use however? Isn't that just complicating things for no reason?
That's a totally fair question. You absolutely can use but, and native speakers use it hundreds of times a day for basic things. I want coffee, but we're out of milk. That's fine.
Right.
But think about the sociolinguistics, how society judges your language. Think about the tone you want to set in a high-stakes environment. Mixing simple words with slightly more formal connectors elevates the entire tone of your conversation.
How so? What is the listener subconsciously thinking when they hear but versus however?
Well, if you're in a professional setting or an academic setting, using but 5 times in 1 minute sounds repetitive. Subconsciously to the listener, it sounds reactive. It sounds like you're just making excuses. We tried this, but it failed. I called them, but they didn't answer.
Ah, yeah.
It sounds a bit basic and defensive. Using, however, signals to the listener's subconscious that you are capable of sophisticated thought organization. It's proactive. It says, I have evaluated the first fact, and now I am objectively presenting a countering fact. Furthermore, it keeps the listener engaged because the rhythm of your speech has variety.
Variety. That is the key right there. You don't want to sound like a metronome just ticking away at the exact same speed, blending everything together with and but. You want a melody. You want peaks and valleys. You want stops and starts.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's however. It's your stop sign. Now, here is where it gets really interesting because our second word of contrast is whereas, and it functions completely differently in the listener's mind.
Yes, it does. Whereas ura also shows contrast, but it's used specifically to compare two different things happening at the exact same time. It means while, or in contrast, but it implies a direct side-by-side comparison.
Let's share a basic example first so everyone understands the mechanics. She prefers coffee, whereas I prefer tea.
Notice the stark difference in structure compared to however. With however, we had two completely separate sentences separated by a period. With whereas, we elegantly connect two different experiences in a single breath, usually within the same sentence separated by a comma.
Right.
She prefers coffee, whereas I prefer tea. It acts as a bridge, or better yet, a balancing scale. On one side of the scale is her preference, on the other side is my preference.
Let's look at a natural example for a job interview. This job is highly stressful, whereas my previous role was quite relaxed. Imagine you're sitting across from a hiring manager. You want to sound intelligent and self-aware. If you say sequentially, my old job was relaxed, my new job is stressful, you sound okay. You're just listing facts.
Right, it's fine, but basic.
But if you say, this job is highly stressful, whereas my previous role was relaxed, suddenly you sound like an analyst. You sound observant.
What's fascinating here is the psychological effect this specific word has on the listener. When you use whereas, you are essentially telling the listener, I possess the mental capacity to hold two opposing ideas in my mind at the exact same time, and I can objectively evaluate them for you.
Wow, yeah.
It's an incredibly powerful linguistic tool for demonstrating high-level analytical thinking.
It's like you're handing them the two ideas already perfectly balanced. You've done the cognitive work for them. You're saying, look at this scale, see how one side goes up while the other goes down. It's brilliant.
Totally.
To summarize the contrast section before we move on, however, is your tool for stopping, pivoting, and introducing a contrasting thought in a brand new sentence. It creates a deliberate pause. Whereas is your tool for balancing two contrasting facts in the same sentence, showing that you can analyze two things at once.
Precisely. You have the stop sign and you have the balancing scale. Now we're going to transition from simple contrasts to a much more nuanced, delicate idea. We're going to look at what happens when a result isn't just different, but surprising or completely unexpected.
Oh boy. This is where we navigate the unexpected with the word despite. And I have to be brutally honest with our listeners right now. I think despite is the most dangerous word on our list today.
Oh, without a doubt.
It is a massive stumbling block. I hear so many advanced learners, people who have lived in English-speaking countries for years, make critical grammar mistakes with this one single word.
It is notoriously difficult for B2 learners. It causes a lot of friction. But once you master it, it's an absolute game changer for your fluency. Let's start with the meaning. Despite means even though, or in spite of. It's used to highlight a surprising outcome. You have a logical expectation based on a fact, but the reality breaks that expectation.
Right. Let's look at a basic physical example. If it's pouring rain outside, the logical expectation is that you stay inside your house. So our natural use example is, despite the rain, we went outside for a walk. The outcome going outside is a surprise because of the rain.
The meaning is usually very easy for learners to grasp. Everyone understands the concept of a surprise. The danger, as you mentioned, is entirely in the structural rule. Despite is a preposition, and in English grammar, a preposition must be followed by a noun or a pronoun or a gerund. It absolutely cannot be followed by a full subject and verb clause.
Okay, let's unpack this structural rule slowly, because this is the exact spot where the house falls down for so many learners. The rule is you must use despite plus a noun or are despite plus a verb with an ing ending.
Let's look at the noun rule first because it's simpler. Despite the rain, we went outside. The rain is a noun phrase. It's a physical thing that is grammatically perfect. You have your preposition despite followed immediately by your noun, the rain. Easy.
Makes sense.
But what if we want to use an action word? What if the surprising fact isn't a physical thing like rain, but a feeling or an action? Look at our next example. Despite feeling tired, she kept working on the project.
Feeling. That's the verb with the ing ending. So I need to ask a major clarification question here because I know exactly what our listeners are thinking right now.
What's that?
They're asking, why can't it just say the normal verb? Why does feel have to become feeling? Can you dwell on the mechanics of that ing change for a moment without making it sound like a boring grammar textbook?
I love this question. It's all about how English categorizes words. Think of a preposition like despite as a specific type of electrical socket. It only accepts one type of plug,
Okay.
A noun plug, a thing.
Okay, a socket.
Now, an action word, a verb like feel or work or run, is the wrong shape. It's not a thing, it's an action. If you try to jam a verb into a preposition socket, you get a short circuit. It sounds incredibly wrong to a native speaker's ear.
So how do we fix the plug?
In English, when we take a verb and we add ing to the end of it, we perform a magic trick. We turn it into what's called a gerund. A gerund acts exactly like a noun. It becomes a thing. The action itself becomes a locked concept. Because despite is a preposition that demands a noun after it, we use that ing form to magically transform our verb into the exact shape the grammar requires. So feeling tired is no longer an active verb phrase. It's treated as a single concept, a state of being. It's the thing known as tiredness.
I love that. It's almost like saying, despite the condition of feeling tired. The ing wraps the verb up into a little noun package, a little box. So despite can accept it smoothly.
Exactly. It packages the action. And this brings us to the most common, most persistent, most credibility-damaging B2 mistake out there. Because learners don't understand the packaging trick, they frequently try to put a whole sentence, a full subject and a verb right after despite. They will say, despite she was tired, she kept working.
Despite she was tired. You hear it everywhere. I've heard CEOs say it. I've heard politicians say it. And it sounds a little bit like nails on a chalkboard once you know the rule. It immediately flags you as a non-native speaker who hasn't mastered the syntax.
We must explicitly correct this right now.
Yes.
Despite she was tired is absolutely 100% incorrect. You cannot have she, the subject, and was the verb directly after despite. You're trying to jam the wrong plug into the socket. You must transform that state of being into an ingerund package. You must say, despite being tired. That is the correct, natural, native-sounding way to say it. Despite being tired, she kept working.
Despite being tired. I want our listeners to literally pause what they're doing and repeat that out loud wherever they are. Despite being tired. The verb to be becomes being. If it's raining, you don't say despite it is raining. You say despite the rain. If you are hungry, you don't say despite I was hungry. You say despite being hungry. If they didn't have enough money, you don't say despite they didn't have money. You say despite lacking funds or despite not having money.
Once you lock in that structural rule, that packaging trick, you instantly jump from an intermediate speaker to an advanced speaker in the ears of your listener. It removes all that cognitive friction.
It really is one of those small grammatical tweaks that yields massive results in how your intelligence and competence are perceived. It proves you have control over the mechanics of the language, not just the vocabulary.
Absolutely. So let's review where we are in our blueprint. We've covered simple contrasts with the stop sign word however and the balancing scale word whereas. We've navigated surprising contrasts and the ing trick with despite.
Right.
Now let's pivot. Let's move away from contrast entirely. Let's look at how native speakers logically build up an argument, prove a point, and show the consequences of an action. When you want to sound highly logical, structured, and organized, you need words that show cause and effect. You need words that add weight to your argument. For this, we use the heavy hitters, therefore and moreover.
Therefore, what a fantastic authoritative word. It means so or as a result. It shows a direct conclusion. When you use therefore, you sound like a lawyer closing a case or a scientist presenting a peer-reviewed finding.
Let's analyze a basic example to see the mechanics. He didn't study, therefore, he failed the test. Notice the direct, undeniable cause and effect. Action A leads inevitably to result B.
And again, listen to the structure. 2 separate sentences. He didn't study. Full stop. A pause to let the facts settle. Therefore, he failed the test. Let's look at another example. The server crashed overnight. Therefore, we lost the morning data.
What's fascinating here is comparing therefore to its simpler, much more common cousin, the word so. An intermediate B2 learner will almost always default to using so because it's what they learned in their first year of English. The server crashed, so we lost the data. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that grammatically. But so is very casual. It's a conversational shortcut. When you replace so with therefore, you completely change the atmosphere of the sentence.
Okay, I have to push back on this because I think context is huge here.
It is.
If I'm sitting with my team at a casual lunch and I say, I forgot my wallet, therefore I cannot pay for this sandwich, I'm going to sound incredibly pompous and arrogant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where's the line between sounding smart and sounding like a snob?
That's a vital distinction. You're absolutely right. If you're at a cafe, use so. I was hungry, so I bought a sandwich. Save therefore for when the stakes are higher. If you're in a boardroom explaining why $1 million project missed a deadline, you do not want to use casual shortcuts. You want to sound organized and authoritative. You say, the supplier was 2 weeks late with the raw materials, therefore the production schedule was delayed.
That does sound much better.
It makes you sound highly logical. It shows that you understand the mechanics of consequence. You aren't just listing bad things that happen, you are proving why they happened.
I see. It demonstrates that you are in control of the facts, not a victim of them. It removes emotion and replaces it with logic. Now let's look at its partner in building arguments. The word moreover.
Moreover. This is a word that means also or in addition, but it's so much stronger than just saying and. It's used to add extra vital information. Crucially, it is used to strengthen a point you just successfully made.
Let me offer a metaphor for this because I want to get away from the typical grammar explanations. Using moreover isn't just adding a cherry on top of a sundae. It's more like the concept of compound interest in a bank account.
Oh, I like that. Explain how that works.
Well, you make your initial deposit. That's your first argument. It's solid. It has value. Our new software increases productivity by 20%. It's a great point. But then you want to let that value compound. You want to make the argument so overwhelming that the investor has no choice but to agree.
Right.
You use moreover to stack the evidence. Moreover, it reduces operational costs by half. You didn't just add a related fact. You multiplied the power of the first fact. It's the final nail in the coffin of a debate.
That's a perfect analogy. The moreover fact isn't just an afterthought. It's the compounding evidence that seals the deal. Look at a character reference example. He is highly hardworking. That's a strong recommendation. But when you add the compound interest, moreover, he is incredibly reliable under pressure, you're telling the listener that the evidence is overwhelming.
It is such a persuasive word. If you're trying to convince someone to buy your product, agree with your proposal, or hire you for a job, moreover, tells them that the benefits just keep coming. I have 10 years of management experience. Moreover, I am fluent in 3 key regional languages. Boom, you win the interview.
And if we connect this back to the sociolinguistics of the English language, notice how formal these 2 specific words feel. Therefore, and moreover, are academic, professional terms. They belong in written reports, formal presentations, and serious analytical discussions, which brings us to a potential minefield for our listeners.
Yes, this is the most critical part of this entire discussion. Knowing the dictionary definitions of these 5 words is only half the battle. We've established that they are the cement. We've established that they make you sound logical, observant, and confident. But the conversation must now shift to how to deploy these words naturally in everyday conversation. Because if you use them incorrectly, you will not sound intelligent. You'll sound weird.
This is a very real danger, and we see it happen the moment a student learns these words. When learners discover the power of these connectors, they tend to over-apply them. They fall in love with the cement and they start pouring it everywhere, even when they don't have any heavy bricks to glue together. They use them to connect tiny, insignificant thoughts.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
So, based on our teaching experience, we have developed 3 pro tips for real-world application to ensure you sound smart without sounding robotic.
Let's go through these specific strategies for success. Strategy number 1, Mix formal connecting words with simple, everyday vocabulary.
This is absolutely crucial for sounding natural. Do not pair however and therefore with incredibly rare archaic vocabulary from a 19th century novel. If you walk into an office and say, "The majestic luminary descended beneath the horizon, therefore the nocturnal abyss enveloped us," people will look at you like you've lost your mind.
I would literally run away from someone who spoke to me like that. It sounds completely unhinged.
Exactly. You want to use these formal connectors with clear, everyday English words. The sun went down, therefore it got dark. The contrast between the simple, effective nouns and verbs and the formal, structured connector creates a highly educated, modern rhythm. It shows you know how to structure a thought without needing to prove you swallowed a dictionary.
That leads right into strategy number 2. Context is everything. Use these connectors specifically when explaining complex ideas. As we mentioned with the sandwich example, you don't need to use moreover when talking about what you ate for breakfast. I had toast. Moreover, I had an egg. It's ridiculous.
It really is.
Save these heavy-duty tools for when you are actually building something big. Use them in performance reviews. Use them when explaining a multi-step process. Use them when you're trying to persuade someone to change their mind.
Yes. Reserve your best tools for your most important work. And that brings us to the final and most crucial strategy. Do not use all of them in a single sentence.
Oh, this is my favorite mistake to hear.
Yeah.
Let me give you a funny scenario. Imagine an English learner who just listened to the first half of this discussion about connectors. They're so excited. They want to show off all their new structural vocabulary at once to their boss. So they walk into the office and they say, in one single breath, "Despite being tired, I wanted to go out, whereas my friend wanted to stay in. However, we went out. Therefore, we had fun. Moreover, it was cheap."
It makes me laugh, but I promise you, I have heard sentences very similar to that in actual speaking exams. We call it a Frankenstein sentence. It's a monster stitched together from too many parts. When you cram all those connecting words into one breath, you destroy the very thing they are designed to create: structure and clarity.
It's exactly like pouring a massive wet pile of cement on the floor with no bricks at all. It's just a messy puddle. Natural pacing is just as important as the vocabulary itself. You need to let the words breathe.
To illustrate this practically, let's walk the listener through a transformation exercise. We have a basic repetitive sentence here. It's a sentence an intermediate learner might say without thinking. It communicates the facts, but it doesn't impress. It goes like this: "I was tired, but I finished my work and I feel good."
I was tired, but I finished my work and I feel good. It's grammatically correct. Nobody is going to misunderstand you, but it's entirely uninspiring. It uses but and as weak little pieces of string tying the ideas together. It sounds like a tired high school student giving an excuse.
Now, let's show how a native speaker or an advanced, confident professional would upgrade this exact same idea using our intelligent vocabulary toolkit. We're going to replace the weak string with solid cement.
Listen closely to the transformation. I was tired. However, I finished my work. Therefore, I feel satisfied.
Let's analyze how the rhythm, tone, and psychological perception change between those two versions. In the first version, it's one continuous flat run. I was tired, but I finished my work and I feel good. There's no depth.
Right, no depth at all.
In the upgraded version, there is immense authority. I was tired. A simple statement of fact. Then, the pivot, the stop sign. However, I finished my work. A statement of resilience and dedication. Then, the logical conclusion, the cause and effect. Therefore, I feel satisfied.
The speaker of the second version sounds like someone you want to hire immediately. They sound in control of their emotions, their workload, and their logic. They took a negative being tired and logically proved how they turned it into a positive. And notice the slight vocabulary upgrade at the very end. We changed feel good to feel satisfied. Mixing that slightly more precise professional adjective with therefore creates a beautifully polished finish.
It's a perfect demonstration of the power of structure. The core meaning, the raw facts of the situation, didn't change at all, but the perception of the speaker changed completely. They went from sounding like a survivor to sounding like a leader.
So let's bring this all together. What is the ultimate summary of our mission today? It's to remind you that sounding intelligent in English requires clarity, structure, and confidence. It absolutely does not require overly complicated, unpronounceable vocabulary words that you copied from a thesaurus.
The 5 words we explored today, however, therefore, whereas despite and moreover, are incredibly powerful tools. They are the cement that builds strong arguments, sophisticated comparisons, and logical conclusions. But remember the rules. They are only powerful when they are used naturally, mixed with simple language, paced correctly, and applied to the right situations.
You can't just write these words in a notebook and expect them to work magic during your next presentation. You must practice them in real conversations. You must say them out loud. Start tomorrow. Use however instead of but in your next email. If you start using them intentionally, they will quickly stop feeling like new vocabulary, and they will just become a natural part of your everyday, intelligent English.
And as you begin to practice these words, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. We've spent all this time talking about the words themselves, the spelling, the gerund grammar rule for despite, the compound interest meaning of moreover. But the true secret to sounding intelligent goes beyond the letters on the page.
Exactly. I want you to start listening to the pauses native speakers take when they use these words. The true power of a word like however or therefore isn't just in the syllables you speak. It's in the confident, brief moment of silence right before you say the word and the silence right after it.
That silence is key.
It really is. That silence is where the listener's brain processes your intelligence. It shows you aren't rushing. You aren't panicking. You aren't desperately trying to find the next word. You are in total control of the room. So in your next conversation, when you deploy your new cement, I challenge you to practice that confident pause. Let the silence do some of the heavy lifting for you. Keep practicing, keep building those bridges, and we'll see you next time.